If there are no further points of order, perhaps we can now move to the urgent question from Diana Johnson.
Secretary of State for Health to make a statement on the publication of the Penrose inquiry and the implications for the UK Government.
Minister Jane Ellison.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, the Prime Minister issued an apology on behalf of the Government for these tragic events, and my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Health, laid a written ministerial statement as an interim response to the Penrose inquiry. As the Honourable Member for Hull North knows, this was a Scottish public inquiry, and I understand that Scottish ministers will not be making a statement to their Parliament until this afternoon. It would therefore be inappropriate for me to comment about the report in detail at this stage. However, I can say that Lord Penrose reviewed over 118,000 documents and more than 150 statements from patients and relatives, and also took oral evidence from many of the officials involved in decision-making at that time. It would therefore seem to be an extremely thorough job, which for the first time provides an authoritative narrative of events. As I said in this House during the backbench debate on the 15th of January, this Government would be making an interim response to Lord Penrose's report, which we did yesterday with the written ministerial statement, and it would be for the next Government to consider a more substantive response once it's had time to consider what the inquiry says. Yesterday, we announced that we will be allocating up to an additional one-off £25 million from the Department of Health's 2015-16 budget to support any transitional arrangements to a different system of financial assistance. We intend this to provide assurances to those affected by these devastating events that we've heard their concerns and are making provision to reform the system. We had hoped, as she knows, to consult during this Parliament on reforming the ex gratia financial assistance schemes. I very much regret that our considerations on the design of a future system of financial assistance for those affected have been subject to postponement whilst we awaited publication of Lord Penrose's final report. The Prime Minister also said yesterday that if he remains Prime Minister after the election in May, his government will respond to the findings of the report as a matter of priority.
Diana Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, and thank you for granting the urgent question this morning and for the Minister's response. As we know, the contaminated blood scandal was the biggest disaster in the history of the NHS, and today we should again remember all those who contracted HIV and hepatitis C and their families. For them, this is not a historic issue, but an ongoing tragedy which continues to have a devastating impact on their lives. And I am pleased that the Penrose inquiry, published yesterday after 6 years and in 5 volumes and running to 1,800 pages, appears to accurately document the tragedy and how it came about and the decisions that were taken at the time. But I do share the surprise and disappointment of those affected that the inquiry only made one recommendation. And on that basis, I know it was a very difficult day for many people yesterday. The apology from the Prime Minister on behalf of the United Kingdom Government is a significant moment in a long struggle for recognition of the scale of this tragedy and is very welcome. But what we need is a proper system for supporting and compensating all those affected. The APPG report published a few weeks ago showed the current system is simply not meeting the needs of those that it's meant to help and is not fit for purpose. I would seek a reassurance from both front benches that whoever forms the next government, swift action is taken to provide a permanent settlement on support and compensation, and secondly, that the £25 million announced yesterday will be specifically stipulated to go to the beneficiaries and not for the trusts and funds to decide what to do with it themselves. And this is not the end of the matter. As the Minister knows, there is a very large number of MPs, cross-party, who will be returning to this issue after May the 7th and holding whoever is in power to account to sort out this tragedy.
Minister.
Well, the Honourable Lady is absolutely right to draw attention to the fact that this is an ongoing tragedy and many people's lives have been devastated and continue to be very severely affected. As I said in my statement, I pay tribute to her, other honourable members and the all-party group, and my honourable friend, the member for North East Bedfordshire, who cannot be in the House today, but has spoken to me in the last couple of days since we've had the inquiry. To all members who've represented their constituents so ably and so passionately over many years. She is obviously right to say that the next Parliament will return to this, of course, and she knows, and I was very open with members during the backbench debate on the 15th of January, that I have a sense of frustration that we weren't able to do more in this Parliament. It is a matter of record from that debate that I spoke with Scottish Government ministers in spring 2014 in anticipation that we would have an earlier report from the inquiry and that we might be able to move forward. If I can just, in response to the specific point she asked, just reiterate, as I said in my initial remarks, the money, the 25 million, the up to one-off 25 million, is to support any transitional arrangements to a different system of financial assistance, and that is intended to provide assurances to those affected by these devastating events that we've heard their concerns.
I just remind the House there is a further UQ which has to be taken, and I am very keen to proceed in an efficient way. So we'll take colleagues, but as briefly as possible, and then we must move on. Mr. Andy Burnham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When people look back at the 2010 to 2015 Parliament, it will be remembered for some extraordinary work to right historical wrongs on Bloody Sunday, Hillsborough, on child abuse. But as it comes to an end, this Parliament has not made enough progress on perhaps the greatest injustice of them all, the loss and ruination of thousands, many thousands of lives through the use of contaminated blood. That is not to say there has not been progress. I pay tribute to my honourable friend, member for Hull North, and indeed many others across the House who have worked assiduously in this Parliament to keep this issue on the agenda. The Prime Minister was right to apologise yesterday, but my honourable friend is right that the apology will only have real meaning if it is followed by efforts to bring truth, accountability and redress. Let me ask the Minister about the one recommendation the Penrose report makes, that all people in Scotland who had a blood transfusion before 1991 now be tested for hepatitis C. Does the Minister think that that recommendation should apply in England? Given, as my honourable friend says, that Penrose doesn't answer all of the questions, does she, nor does it apply accountability to those who made decisions in this regard? Does she think that there now needs to be a further process of inquiry in the next Parliament to bring that accountability? And finally, Mr. Speaker, can I say that while we can't bring a resolution today, does the Minister agree with me that the best thing we can say today to the many thousands of people affected who will be watching these proceedings is that we will work together across this House in the next Parliament to bring a full, fair and final resolution to this terrible injustice?
Well, certainly, Mr. Speaker, on the right honourable gentleman's latter point, I absolutely agree. This is a tragedy that goes beyond party and has spanned many parliaments now, and we do need to move forward. I can only reiterate my frustration that we weren't able to make more progress in this Parliament, but I can give the House and through members here, their constituents, the assurance that a great deal of work has been going on in this regard, and I'm sure that detailed work will continue to go on as the many pages of Lord Penrose's inquiry are considered. With regard to the one recommendation Lord Penrose makes, that's that the Scottish Government takes all reasonable steps to offer a hepatitis C test to everyone who had a blood transfusion before 1991. I can confirm the Department of Health concluded a UK-wide look-back exercise in 1995 to try and identify everyone who might have received infected blood prior to 1991, but the Department will consider if there is anything more that can be done on this in England, and that work is very important and will be undertaken. With regard to the next steps, all relevant documents, as we confirmed in the written ministerial statement yesterday, have been or will be released. The government's initial reaction is that another inquiry would not be in the best interests of sufferers and their families, as it would further delay action to address their concerns. And the strong message I've had is that it is time for action. And I think I've just heard the same from the Shadow Secretary of State. Given the apparent thoroughness of Lord Penrose's report and the fact that the report sets the events in Scotland in a wider UK context, I think that does give us a sense of the fact that he has looked at these events in the widest possible sense, including for England, and he has done a very thorough job of examining the facts. And as we say, we now, for the first time ever, have that detailed, authoritative narrative account of what happened, and that is an important building block on which the next government can take its policy forward.
John Clark.
Mr. Speaker, you will recall that on many occasions I've raised the case of John Pryor from Moodiesburn in my constituency, someone who was infected in the 70s and whose files have been lost. Bluntly, he is absolutely devastated. The report, he says, offers him nothing. He regards the £25 million on offer from the Prime Minister as mere peanuts, not even sufficient for Scotland. Given that this report cost £12 million, went on for 7 years, has produced one recommendation, will the Minister accept that that's not sufficient to respond to 4,000 people who are suffering? Can we have a final agreement, a settlement for every individual, consistent with what happened in Ireland, consistent with the last Labour government's delivery for miners' compensation? Otherwise, this report will be seen as a mountain that produced a mouse.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this inquiry was commissioned by the Scottish Minister, I think actually the now current First Minister of Scotland, in 2008. It is a matter for the Scottish Government to comment on in regard of the length of time that's been taken, or rather for Lord Penrose, and the expense. The money that was announced in the written ministerial statement yesterday was, as we said it would be, part of an interim response. It's interim because this report, this very long report, comes right at the end of the Parliament. And of course, I'm sure the next Parliament, the next government will want to return to a more substantive response to the findings of this very thorough inquiry.
Michael Connaughty.
As the chair of the All-Party Group on Haemophilia from 2001 to 2010, what we got then was an interim settlement as well, because no one would face up to the fact that these people should be compensated, not just given an ex gratia payment or some more money to go away quietly. They say all documents were looked at. For the time I've been involved in this campaign, we've been told by late Alf Morris, that he was promised by Lord Owen, the former Health Minister, that there were documents available that proved that after the government took the policy that no more contaminated blood would be brought from America and bought from dangerous sources, that the health service went on buying that blood. And it said in the report that they've saved many people's lives, but the reality is somebody in the health service contaminated these people by breaching the policy of a government. When are we going to see those documents revealed and look for a proper public inquiry and compensation for the victims, not some payoff?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think that's a rather harsh response, if I might say so. The terms of reference, it is worth noting that the terms of reference given by the Scottish Government to the Penrose inquiry do not make reference to compensation. Yesterday's written ministerial statement referred to an amount that was specifically intended to help with transitional arrangements while the next government considers how it might want to take forward the reform of the various payment systems, and we explored that in the backbench debate. With regard to the documents, I mean, this is a report running to many thousands of pages that's considered all of these many documents and statements, and as I laid out. all of the relevant documents held by the Department of Health on blood safety covering the period from 1970 to 1985 have been published in line with the Freedom of Information Act and are available on the National Archives website. And as part of our response to Lord Penrose's report, we are releasing all of the relevant documents on blood safety that we hold for the period 1986 to 1995. The Government has been completely transparent and open about that and given the inquiry all the documents that it asked for, and we are now releasing all the relevant documents subject to that. But some of the issues that he refers to, because of the timing of this report, are inevitably, I'm afraid, a matter for the next government to inquire, to consider in detail.
Jasmine Qureshi.
Mr. Speaker, my constituent David Fielding suffered from this and his whole life has been ruined. I would ask the government and any successive government to compensate these victims properly.
Minister.
Well, as I've said, Mr. Speaker, those are matters which the next government will need to consider. All of these things. The compensation was not in the terms of reference of the Penrose inquiry, but I think it was important, given the extent of the inquiry, that we waited for the Penrose inquiry to report. And unfortunately, it has reported too late for us to be able to make substantial progress in this Parliament. But I'm quite certain that the next government, held to account by the next Parliament, will return to these matters as a priority.
Neil Griffith.
Mr. Speaker, well, my constituent points out that he received a letter in 2009 saying that he could have been infected as late as 2001, including with variant CJD. And so what can the Minister say to those people, whereas this report only goes up to 1991, to reassure them that all the issues even going up to 2001, will be taken into consideration, that they will be equally likely to be able to be compensated?
Well, Mr. Speaker, all relevant matters will need to be considered by the next government in relation to this matter. And by the time the next government is formed and the next Parliament assembles, all honourable members will have had more chance to look at the detailed narrative account that Lord Penrose has provided of these tragic events.
Mr. Andrew Slaughter.
The Minister says she regrets more has not been done in this Parliament. One, if not the main reason for that, is because we were waiting for the Penrose inquiry,
yes.
So it will be doubly disappointing today.
Yeah.
Given she's also said that a lot of work has been done, and I appreciate her writ is about to run out, but can she say, has she formed the opinion, has the government formed the opinion, that there should be a comprehensive financial settlement on which what the Prime Minister announced should just be the down payment?
Hear, hear.
Well, Mr. Speaker, yesterday's written ministerial statement was just what I said it would be in the backbench debate on the 15th of January. It is an interim response to a very, very long and detailed report. And of course, all matters will need to be considered in a substantive response to be made by the next government.
Mr. Andrew Miller.
Can I ask the Minister to reflect carefully on paragraphs 111 to 113 of the Science and Technology Committee's legacy report on our section on variant CJD? The Minister gave some compelling evidence to our inquiry, but the one area of difference was about protecting the long-term protection of research funding to give public confidence around this area. Will she look carefully at that and put her response in the public domain?
Well, I will certainly look at that. I fear I may not have time to put a response in the public domain, but I can give an assurance to the next Parliament, and it's the Select Committee, that I'm sure that were I to be in office, I'd be happy to respond to that in detail. And as he knows, we've had detailed exchanges about these matters over the last year.
Ranker Davis.
The reality for all of our constituents affected by this is, as we awaited the Penrose report, nothing has now materially changed for them during the life of this Parliament, and it will rest to the next Parliament to move forward. But could I ask the Minister, in a positive vein, does she have a view, personally, as a Minister, as a representative of the Government, whether these peoples whose lives have been torn apart should actually now be adequately compensated by the next government?
Well, I think the Prime Minister was very clear yesterday in what he said to the House, that it is a priority to return to this important matter and these tragic events. And The reason we say it is an interim response is exactly because the Prime Minister and this government feel that a more substantive response will need to be given in the next Parliament. So, of course, certainly my feeling is that we would certainly need to return to this important subject and respond more substantively across a wide range of issues. I'm very well aware, for example, of the high level of concern amongst sufferers with the way that the current financial assistance schemes work. And as I say, I think that they will certainly need to be looked at in a great deal more detail.
Kerry McCarthy.
I met with a Hep C nurse and support worker in Bristol on Friday, and they would urge not only speedier diagnosis and more efforts on that, but also earlier treatment for people who are infected before they develop serious liver problems. Can I ask the Minister to take that back to her department?
Of course, and actually during the course of my response to the backbench business debate, I actually did give members of Parliament some sense of the way to represent constituents with regard to the latest NHS treatments. The latest treatments available for hepatitis C are of a different order of effectiveness and with many fewer side effects than the older treatments, and it is important that anyone affected is seen by a hepatologist and referred in appropriately. And I know that NICE are currently considering, the NHS are currently considering those new treatments.
Pamela Nash.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The report published yesterday suggests that NHS staff were working on the best available knowledge to them at the time. As chair of the All-Party Group on HIV, however, I often hear of current incidents where NHS staff do not have the best available knowledge at their fingertips. Can I just ask what the Government has done and is doing to ensure that we have a very well-informed NHS? And can I ask the Minister, is she confident that there's not a similar tragedy brewing within the NHS today?
Well, I suppose two things I would say in response to that. In terms of blood donations, the picture today, thankfully, is very, very different to the situation that Lord Penrose was looking at from the 70s and 80s. Today, blood donations are screened for both HIV and Hep C, as well as a number of other infections. I, in fact, recently visited the blood processing site at Colindale for myself to see the very rigorous and very high-tech approach that's taken to blood safety in this country. So I think members can be more reassured there. Of course, synthetic products are available for the treatment of all haemophilia patients for whom they're suitable now. And with regard to the latest knowledge, I can only reiterate NHS England is considering a further early access policy to include patients with cirrhosis, which is aiming to have in place in the first half of this year, and also, not importantly, NICE guidance on the use of these therapies is expected again in the first half of this year.